we might be on the cusp of the first ever double sweep in the NBA Conference Finals in the history of the National Basketball Association. We will know this after tonight's and tomorrow night's results, as both the Nuggets are up on the Lakers 3-0, and the Heat are up on the Celtics 3-0. We'll get to the Lakers and Nuggets in a bit, but yesterday, and I don't want to get too much in the details because I know everybody in mainstream media is going to be killing the Celtics today, and justifiably so. They just look like they gave up, and Missoula's just been outcoached. But Heat led by 8. We won't do too many details on the game because I want to make two big macro points here. But the Heat led by 8 after the first quarter. They led by as many as 22 in the second quarter in Game 3 yesterday. The Celtics ended the half on a 9-2 run. They got it to 15 at the half, and you thought, okay, maybe, even though it was the lowest scoring half of the postseason for Boston, maybe that run at the end of the first half might fuel them a little bit. Nope, wasn't the case. Third quarter, the Heat led by as many as 33. They led by 30 after the third quarter. Boston only scored 17 third-quarter points. The Heat end up winning it by 26, 128-102 for under bettors yesterday. Oh, my God. A 74-point fourth quarter torpedoing.
Oh, man.
Just absolutely torpedoing your bet. Apologies from the gambling universe for that.
I didn't even think about that.
Tatum ended up with 14, Brown with 12. That's Tatum with 14 and Brown with 12. Tatum and Brown combined for 1 of 14 from behind the arc yesterday, 7 of 40 from behind the arc for the series. By contrast, let's just focus on the undrafted free agents of the Miami Heat, Vincent, Martin, Robinson, and Strus. The ones that play the most, that is. Vincent with 29 yesterday on 11 of 14 shooting, 6 of 9 from behind the arc. Robinson with 22 on 7 of 11 shooting, 5 of 7 from behind the arc. Caleb Martin, 18, 7 of 11 shooting, 4 of 7 from behind the arc. And Strus added 10. Butler, 16, 8, and 6. 79 combined points, by the way, for those 4 undrafted free agents. Butler, I said 16, 8, and 6. But the Heat, bottom line, 19 of 35 on threes. That's 54.3% yesterday. The Celtics were only 11 of 42. That's 26.2%. If I needed one stat to tell me what happened in the game, that's the only one you really need. Miami, 56.8% period from the floor. And the three-point shooting, by the way, getting back to that for this series. Game 1, in points, Miami was plus 18. Game 2, they were plus 24. Game 3, plus 24 again. So I just want to make broader. We all know the Celtics are cooked, but I just want to make a couple broader points. And I don't want to. The initial part of this is gonna sound like look at me, Kelley, but that's not my point here. Because listen, I had the Warriors. The only pre-flop futures bet I made before this postseason was the Warriors to win the West, as we all know, and that is a loser. But Friday night, we're all headed to the parlay wedding. Friday night, I get into St. Louis, and I want to get the exact bets. So I had first of all, before the game, I took Miami for the series at plus 199 when they're down 1-0. I bet them again plus 212 when the Heat were up 6 in the first quarter. Bet them plus 8.5 at halftime for the second half. Then yesterday, when the pre-flop line went all the way up to the Celtics minus 4.5. And I'm saying to myself, what is this? What is happening? Bet Miami first quarter. Bet Miami first half ATSN money line. Bet Miami game ATSN money line. And again, I'm not saying this to say, oh my God, look at me. What I'm saying this to say is sometimes sports betting, while we're sitting here grinding tennis or grinding golf or grinding baseball, whatever it is that you do on a daily basis, sports betting wise, sometimes sports betting throws a meatball to you right down the center of the plate. And like so many things that sports betting is it's a reflection of the human condition. Like so many things in life, you have to be able to recognize the opportunity when it happens. And if we had the resources, Kelley, if I said before this show, I was like, put together all of the clips of this show where I said something about Spoelstra versus Missoula, or telling all my guests, like when we went into break, I was like, hey, what do you think the series is going to be when we come back? Yep. And I remember with you, I was like, you going to learn.
2-1 Boston.
You going to learn, right? I kept saying stuff like that. Or the analytics cited about the Heat, the deflected balls, the points off screens, all of these the loose balls recovered, the loose basketballs recovered. The Celtics being the least championship-like of all of these Final Four teams. Remember, I asked all the guests that last week, and I felt the answer was clearly the Celtics. It's all of that is great, but it's all the point of that is It's all a study, a fascinating study in how the betting market, the reputation of a team, the Celtics, or the perception that they were the better team, somehow trumped what was so clearly in front of people's eyes for this entire postseason. And sometimes that happens. And then the line still goes the other direction. And you have to be able to say to yourself, what in God's name is happening? I must bet this, and I must bet this with conviction. Because it'll, by the way, if you're having trouble in other sports, it'll erase a lot of that pain real quick. Or maybe you're doing well in the other stuff, and this will just boost it into a turbo for you. So that's the first of the two things. The first of the two things is sometimes just trust your eyes. Over and over again, this is so apparent. The cousin of that, the adjunct of that is, we've talked on this show, and I think we got into this accidentally with Jay Kahn, of all people, who does hockey with us, where we got into this notion of, Jay Kahn didn't watch the NBA regular season. He just showed up for the postseason. And we sort of got into this side. I was like, this is such a great point, because sometimes you can be taken off the scent of something, because we always talk about, hey, big sample size means more than small sample size. And on this show, we're all analytics people, and we all believe if you're not doing anything with numbers, you're probably doing this wrong. But so I said with the Jay Kahn thing, I'm like, hey, look, maybe not watching the NBA season this year actually turned out to be a good thing when it came specifically to the Miami Heat, because we cited a whole bunch of metrics. They're 28th in this offensive category, 27th in this, 29th in this during the regular season.
Cost me a lot of money.
Cost you a lot of money. Let's take that one step further. Maybe I wasn't going far enough with that. So I had a little exchange yesterday by text with Felica and Will on this. Maybe I wasn't taking that far enough. Maybe we can even take it to the extent, and this is going to be tough for a guy like you, who is a big NBA guy, or any of our NBA analysts who delve in this stuff on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis during the season. But maybe, I won't say it's widespread in the NBA, it doesn't apply to every team. But maybe with a team like the Heat, and maybe this applies to more teams than we'd like to admit, the regular season is filled with dirty data. That these teams in an 82-game schedule so don't care about the day-to-day and the week-to-week, so only give a care about what is going to happen when it really matters late, that to actually pay so close attention and to actually be so close to the sun on a team's data over an 82-game schedule, the Heat being the greatest example, not only takes you off the scent, but actually causes you to lose money in the end because you are so entrenched, and I'm talking about you, I'm saying the market is so entrenched on their perception of the Celtics on one hand and the Heat on the other, that what is before them night after night after night come April and May, they just refuse to believe. That's a bad thing for NBA bettors. Do you feel there's any truth to that? That could possibly be a thing?
Yeah, I think possibly, and I think very, this is the one team. I don't know that applies.
Don't you? But it's the one team we get to see it manifest.
Yes,
with.
yes.
Don't you think that it's multiple teams?
I don't know. I know what you're getting with here, and I agree with the Heat, but. Okay, like the Denver Nugget,
that's an example where the Denver Nuggets is actually exactly what we think. I'm not saying it's the whole league. I'm not saying it's the whole league. But I think more than in other leagues, where there's a 17-game schedule. How many games play in the NFL now? 17-game schedule. College football, even fewer games, right? We've always said how hockey is random come postseason time. But maybe we just don't give college basketball's 30 games. But even college basketball has a little of this, right? Ed Feng's great about saying the preseason rankings, the AP preseason rankings, which bettors never pay attention to, actually manifest greater than the roughly 30-game schedule during the college basketball season, where we get completely fooled by certain ups and downs. So I'm just saying maybe this is something that bettors need to keep in mind. And the Heat is the greatest example. How was that 4.5 last night? How did the money go the other way?
No idea.
Come on. Okay, and I want to read this tweet too, because again, this is about what I was saying in the first segment. So, Al Giannis said about me saying, you gotta be able to recognize in sports betting that every once in a while you have a meatball down the middle of the plate, and you have to be able to recognize that. Now, Giannis said, the thing is, sports betting throws you a real meatball what percent of the time? 1%? And how many times do you think you have a meatball and it turns out not to be? A lot. So I don't know. And Patrice, 4725, said, agreed if it was as easy as picking off these meatballs. No one said it was. He said, we'd be all living on a private island. As bettors, we tend to only remember the ones that win. There is nobody more sensitive to confirmation bias than I am, sir. But what I'm trying to say, and I'm guessing neither of you had the Heat last night. That's the first thing. But I would say this. No one said it's easy. No one said it's easy. But if you've been around this long enough, the point that I'm trying to make is you become more skilled at recognizing when those moments are. So let me tell you the comparison that I made to friends yesterday about this game and about this series is from 20 years ago, and it involves another South Florida professional sports team. Do you know what I'm referring to, Kelley Bydlon?
Marlins.
That is exactly right. I'm referring to the Florida Marlins. In 2003, the Yankees were just coming off their golden era of winning World Series, and yes, they had lost to the Diamondbacks in the World Series 2 years before that. But here they were, still the Goliath in baseball, taking on this Florida Marlins team. Or at the time it was the Florida Marlins. And the Marlins were so clearly better than the betting markets were suggesting. And night after night after night, whether it was Josh Beckett or other pitchers, you realized if you were watching these games, oh my God, they're going to keep throwing out the Marlins at plus 190 every night. And the series price is still going to be plus 190, $2 on the Marlins. And you recognize if you go through enough experiences like that, when these moments occur, they are not often, to answer your question. And no one is suggesting it's easy to recognize them. But if you do this long enough, you do become more skilled in recognizing those moments, and you do become more skilled in then translating that recognition into actual bets that get triggered. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying any of us are infallible about it. Please don't misinterpret it as such. So there's that. And I think this series was that example, and this whole postseason has been that example with the Heat. Anyway, it makes for an interesting case study, which we don't see every day in every sport. And certainly in the NBA, this is unprecedented. And I stand by what I said. People gave me flack for saying when they beat the Bucks, you could argue it's the greatest upset. It was like the fifth biggest upset by betting line in the history of the NBA. But I went through the top four and told you why you could still say this Heat one was over the Bucks was better. If they get to the finals, it's unprecedented, even though the 99 Knicks got there, lockout season, 50 games. If they win it all, dude, we didn't think this was possible in the NBA. And one of the things that I really sort of hate in life is when something happens that not even people didn't even conceive that it could happen before, and then we become so normalized to it as it's happening. We gotta recognize the moment. This is incredible.
Ridiculous.
This is off the chart. This doesn't happen in the NBA.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.